Hi, I'm Althea. I sold the resort I built from the ground up for $8 million and used part of that money to help my sister, who didn't have a job, didn't have a plan, and didn't ask. But I gave anyway. Then my parents looked me in the eye and said, "Go away, you trash." They took the money, took the credit, took my name off the documents, and then they took my seat at the table I paid for. But what's worse than betrayal is watching people smile at you while they quietly erase you. Ever wonder what it feels like to be written out of your own family, while they profit from your silence? Dinner at my parents' house had always followed a rhythm. Soft jazz from my father's ancient speaker, the click of Vera's manicured nails tapping the stem of her wine glass, and Callista's voice, perfectly pitched between humble and smug. That night in early January, it was no different, at least on the surface. We sat around the oak table in Sandy, Utah, the air tinged with leftover cranberry from a candle Vera refused to throw away. I had just sold my resort. 10 years of sweat, insomnia, and negotiations, gone in a wire transfer that hit my account 3 days prior. $8 million, clean and official. But money had a strange way of shifting family dynamics. "You look exhausted, sweetheart," Vera cooed, swirling her wine. Running that whole operation alone, it couldn't have been easy all these years. I smiled politely, sensing the setup. Callista dabbed her mouth with a cloth napkin she hadn't actually used. "Honestly, Thea, it's good you cashed out. Money isn't everything. Peace of mind, that's priceless." I tilted my head. "Funny. I didn't know you were in the wellness business now." Callista's lips curled. Marvin cleared his throat and reached for the potatoes, but the pause hung there like a wet towel. They didn't say it outright, not yet, but I knew the tone. The way someone mentions a sore ankle before suggesting a cane. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my old childhood room. The posters were gone, replaced by Vera's guest room artwork, bouquets and birds in frames that had never held a real emotion. It was strange to be back in that house, now a woman in her 30s, accomplished by any measure, yet still treated like someone who needed gentle redirection. They hadn't been there when I started the resort. I lived in my car for 5 months during the first winter, juggling waitress shifts and learning grant, writing from YouTube videos. I carried drywall, took out small business loans, dealt with zoning nightmares and predatory vendors. Not one holiday card, not one offer of support. Now that the struggle was over, they were interested, curious even. "You're keeping the money in your regular account?" Marvin asked the next morning over toast. I paused, biting into a slice of burnt rye. "Yeah, for now. I haven't decided on long-term placement yet." "You might want to let us help, at least temporarily," he said. "We could hold it in our joint trust. It's safer, less visible." Vera chimed in without looking up from her tablet. "You trust us, don't you? It's just temporary, nothing complicated." I wanted to say no. I really did. But something about the phrasing, about being the only person in the room resisting help, made me hesitate. I nodded, my gut curling just a bit. 3 days later, I tried to check my balance. Password invalid. I requested a reset. Denied. User not recognized. I called Marvin. He answered like nothing was wrong. "Oh, yeah, I had the bank consolidate it. It's simpler this way. We'll manage it together." "Together?" I repeated. "Sure, I've got your best interest at heart, Althea. Always have." The next hour felt like static. I checked email threads, documents, anything to confirm I was overreacting. Maybe I'd misheard him, but the joint account name now read Marvin Gaskins and Callista Ridgway. I was listed as an authorized viewer, nothing more. I didn't call, didn't text. I just drove. It was dusk by the time I parked outside the house again. I sat in my car for a while, holding my phone, staring at the screen. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel anything I could name, just a heavy buzz in my chest. I walked back in through the side entrance. Vera was arranging lilies in a vase near the fireplace. She turned to me, face smooth as porcelain. "There you are," she said. "Now you can finally relax, sweetie." I nodded slowly, letting the words settle like dust on furniture long untouched. That was the first time I realized I was being managed out of my own success. The spa opened with flowers at every corner and Callista's name on every surface. I stood in the doorway of the new office she was now running, the air heavy with the scent of eucalyptus and lavender. My money had paid for the lease, the renovation, even the marble countertops Callista now leaned against, with all the poise of a practiced CEO. She walked me through the space like a realtor, pointing at the framed mission statement on the wall. "This vision is all about wholeness," she said, smoothing her hair behind her ear. "You know how hard I've worked to make it real." I looked down at the flyer she'd handed me, glossy and weighty, with a smiling headshot of her, and bold letters that read, "Meet our founder, Callista Ridgway." I blinked once, then again. My name was nowhere. Not in the staff list, not in the acknowledgments, not even in the footnote. Callista didn't wait for me to speak. She turned to chat with a woman, arranging sample baskets for the lobby. I swallowed my questions and tucked the flyer into my purse like it didn't burn. Later that week, I received a ticket to a local wellness conference. I'd assumed it was in recognition of my involvement with the spa, until I looked at the lanyard included with the materials. Investor's assistant. At first, I thought it was a clerical error, but when I showed it to Vera, she waved her hand. "It's just for appearances, darling. You know the world respects clean titles. It's all marketing." At the event, Callista sat front and center on the panel stage, speaking about resilience, vision, and feminine leadership. I was tucked behind the sponsor table, next to a display of branded candles. Not one person asked me a question. Not one soul recognized me. After the event, I emailed the spa's registered LLC office to request copies of the founding documents, tax IDs, and banking details, partly for clarity, partly because something inside me had finally started to itch. The PDF arrived 3 days later. My name was missing, not just absent, erased. I called Marvin. He answered after the second ring, voice calm as ever. "Yes, I saw your message." "I wasn't listed," I said. "Not as an owner, not even as a founding member." "It's better this way," he replied without pause. "Legally, your name complicates things. Trust me, sweetheart, you don't want your face attached to business risk right now." My throat tightened. "So I'm just a donor now?" "Your family," he said, like that word still meant something. That weekend, Vera hosted a small brunch at the house. The room buzzed with polite laughter as Callista told stories about hiring staff and managing expansion. She wore a navy dress and low heels, her voice polished. "She's really coming into her own," Marvin said, watching her with quiet pride. Vera sipped her mimosa. "She's grown so much since those college days. We always knew she had the right instincts." I sat across from them, nodding when expected, smiling when prompted. I hadn't said more than 10 words all morning. They never asked about my resort, or the sale, or what I planned to do next. I left early, claiming a scheduling conflict. The lie felt ridiculous. I had nothing on my calendar. Back in my apartment, I dug out the lease agreement for the spa's downtown property, the one I'd funded 6 months earlier. My fingers moved carefully over each page, searching for the line that should have had my signature. At the bottom of the last page, where the boxes were meant for names and titles, I saw it. Callista Ridgway, owner Marvin Gaskins, co-manager signature line 3. N.A. I stared at it for a long time, my breathing slow, almost soundless. My name wasn't missing, it had been removed. I leaned back in my chair, eyes still fixed on that cold little abbreviation. "I don't exist here," I whispered to the empty room. The grand opening was a Friday evening affair, dressed in golden lights and subtle jazz, staged like it had been plucked straight from a wellness magazine. I stood on the edge of the red carpet, my heels catching slightly in the cobblestone walkway outside the downtown spa. Inside, a hostess handed me a program without making eye contact. I scanned it, flipping through each glossy page like someone searching for a forgotten name in a phone book. My name wasn't there. The woman at the check-in table smiled a little too brightly. "Oh, you must be one of our VIP guests from out of state." I blinked at her, then slowly nodded. It wasn't worth correcting her. Not here, not now. I walked into the spa lobby, a space I'd helped fund when it was still drywall and dust. Tonight, it sparkled. Edison bulbs, infused water stations, and faux zen music piped through discreet ceiling speakers. Everyone was talking, sipping cucumber cocktails, complimenting the vision. Callista emerged from the back, hair curled, draped in ivory satin, her voice clear and confident as she laughed with the mayor's assistant. A small crowd followed her, as if drawn to her orbit. I found a seat near the back, somewhere quiet, invisible, but not too far from the stage. I watched the podium, watched the cameras being adjusted. I shouldn't have been surprised. The event began with a polished MC who took the mic with the practiced tone of someone used to charity auctions and gala fundraisers. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate the dream of one woman who refused to give up." She motioned toward the stage. "Please welcome the founder of Callista Wellness Spa, Callista Ridgway." The applause was sharp, immediate. I stayed seated, hands resting in my lap. Then came the thank you segment. "We also want to acknowledge the unwavering support of her parents, Vera and Marvin Gaskins, whose guidance helped this vision take shape." Another round of applause. I didn't move. I don't think I blinked. No mention of me, not a whisper. By the time Marvin raised a glass for the family toast, I was ready for it to end. "Callista," he began, "is everything we've dreamed of. Resilient, elegant, inspiring. She's taken this family's name and carried it forward with dignity and strength." Vera smiled beside him, lifting her flute. "She embodies our legacy. She's who we always hoped our name would live through." The words hit harder than I expected. I felt them in my ribs, like the tightening of a belt you didn't know was around your chest. No one looked in my direction. I rose without drawing attention and made my way to the door. The parking garage was cooler than I remembered. I walked slowly, brochure still clenched in my hand, Callista's face smiling from the front cover. At the valet desk, an assistant handed me a white gift bag labeled "For Our Valued Supporters." Inside, a vanilla candle, a branded pen, and a printed thank you card, unsigned. Back at the elevator, I heard her heels before I saw her. Vera. She approached with a glass of white wine still in hand. "You handled that beautifully," she said, almost softly. "You always were the strong one." I didn't reply. But in my head, a sentence formed that hadn't had words until that moment. Strong doesn't mean silent forever. 2 weeks after the spa opening, I received a dinner invitation from my mother. A thank you dinner, she called it. No occasion, no formal dress required, just family. I arrived at the Ridgway home just before sundown. The scent of roast beef and rosemary floated from the kitchen, masking the tension that seemed baked into every corner of that house. Callista was already seated, scrolling her phone like she had nothing to answer for. Marvin poured wine, humming a hymn he hadn't sung since I was a child. Vera greeted me with a polite kiss on the cheek, her lips cool against my skin. After dinner plates were cleared, I pulled a slim folder from my bag and placed it on the table. 3 pages, neatly clipped together. Copies of the property documents I had quietly funded 6 months earlier, the ones we were supposed to hold jointly. The homestay deal was simple. I'd supply capital, and Marvin would manage the logistics. "Just a quick clarification," I said, trying to sound casual. "I noticed my name is missing from the deed transfer on the Baxter Street house." Vera's face barely shifted. "Why do you always need things in writing, Althea?" "Because that's how ownership works," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "That's how trust works." Callista set her phone down with a sigh. "We did what was best, okay? You're acting like we stole your baby or something." I looked at her, steady. You didn't steal a baby. You just signed it over to yourself. Marvin leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the table. It's all in the family, unless you're not. That line clung to the walls like smoke. I pushed my chair back slightly. So we're doing that now? Cutting people out without a conversation? Callista laughed softly. It's not that deep, Thea. You take everything so personally. I take fraud personally, I replied. Yeah, that's true. The wineglass in Vera's hand slammed against the table so hard it echoed. You know what your problem is? She spat. You think a few $1,000,000 makes you more than trash, but you're still the same mouthy little girl who never knew her place. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was complete. Like the air itself recoiled. I stood slowly, folded the papers back into my folder. My hands didn't shake. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't yell. Callista looked at her nails. Marvin looked anywhere but at me. I walked to the coat rack, slid on my jacket, and headed for the door. Outside, the night was unusually quiet. My car waited under the porch light, and as I opened the door, I paused. Not to cry, not to rethink, but simply to breathe. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad dinner. This was the truth, raw and unveiled. They hadn't just erased my name. They had rehearsed it. By the time I got home, the sky had gone from dark blue to black. I made tea out of habit, sat by the kitchen island, and opened my laptop. No rage, no calls, no preambles. I opened the family group chat, hovered over the text bar, and typed just one line. You will hear from my attorney within 10 days. I hit send. Then I blocked the thread. It's remarkable how quiet life becomes when you stop answering the noise. That morning, I deleted the family group chat from my phone. Not muted. Deleted. I unfollowed, unsubscribed, and unplugged. One by one, I removed them from my online orbit. It was the digital equivalent of shutting every door in a hallway, not to isolate myself, but to keep their wind from blowing through my peace. Then I got to work. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, the LLC registration for the spa, lease documents, old emails that hinted at promises made and debts ignored. I organized it all, color-coded folders labeled proof, ownership, abuse of trust. My apartment became less of a home and more of a war room, but it was mine. A week passed before I reached out to Ramona Stoll, my attorney. Sharp, focused, and not prone to small talk. She met me in her office, no music, no scented candles, just legal pads and purpose. You have every legal right to pursue this, she said after scanning the packet I handed her. But once this goes out, there's no undoing it. Are you ready for that? I didn't flinch. I'd rather be alone than used again. She nodded once, then began typing. The paperwork went out 2 days later. No advance warning, no friendly call. Vera and Marvin received theirs at home, hand-delivered during brunch. Callista was served at the spa, mid-consultation, in front of 2 high-end clients. The delivery guy said she turned the color of sour milk. Vera called 3 times. I didn't answer. Her voicemail shifted tones like a radio dial, confused, outraged, then heartbreakingly performative. Marvin didn't call at all, not even a text. Callista sent one message. You just nuked the family. I didn't reply. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of white wine and opened my private blog. I hadn't written in months, not since the resort sold. I titled the post, What's Worse Than Betrayal? I wrote, It's not betrayal that breaks you. It's the silence afterward. The way people pretend nothing happened, that you're overreacting, that loyalty means swallowing poison with a smile. I didn't burn bridges. I refused to be buried under them. I didn't share the post publicly, not yet. But I left it scheduled, 1 week from that night, auto-publish, just in case. By the next morning, messages trickled in. Quiet ones. A former client messaged, Saw what happened. You're not alone. A past vendor said, Good for you. That family always seemed curated. Even my old assistant sent a heart emoji and a line. About damn time. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The next evening, I lit a candle. Not the spa's brand, just something simple, jasmine and cedar. I was reading on my sofa when I heard the knock. Not a doorbell, a knock. Firm, steady, intentional. I opened the door to a courier holding a manila envelope. No expression, just paperwork. I signed, closed the door, opened it on the counter. 1 letter, 2 words, from Marvin. Let's talk. It started with a link someone forwarded to me without a message. The subject line was vague, just, thought you'd want to see this? I clicked, expecting a product promo or another family Facebook post I had no interest in. What opened was a full-page feature from a local magazine. From rock bottom to wellness empire, the story of Callista Ridgway. My breath stalled halfway in my chest. The article began with a familiar anecdote about sleeping in a car, about showering at gyms, about building something from nothing. But it wasn't my name in the headline. It was Callista's. The photos, those were the worst part. Grainy snapshots from 5, maybe 6 years ago. Me, in work boots, lugging drywall into what would eventually become the guest suites of the resort. Photos I'd once shared in a private group chat, thinking they were safe. They now sat beside a caption that read, Callista during her early hustle years. I sat at the kitchen table staring at that article until the sun shifted across the window and turned the page a dull gray. Then I stood up, opened my laptop, and opened my inbox, almost on autopilot. That's when I saw the email from Eric, one of the angel investors I'd been negotiating with for months. Subject, clarification before next steps. He wrote, We weren't aware you were primarily involved as financial support rather than leadership. Given the shift in narrative, we'll need to reevaluate our alignment with your proposal. Just like that, gone. I didn't write back. There was nothing to fix. Not when the damage wasn't just perception. It was identity theft wrapped in high heels and public praise. By late afternoon, I was back in Ramona's office. She skimmed the article with a lawyer's calm, clicking her pen occasionally, but never speaking until the end. It's unethical, no doubt, she said, but not illegal. She never explicitly said those were her photos, and there's no direct slander, just omission. So she can steal my life story as long as she leaves out my name? Essentially, yes. I nodded, pressing my fingertips into my temples. So I just let her parade around in my skin while I keep paying for her platform? Ramona gave me a long look. I didn't say that. I said now isn't the time to act through the courts, but that doesn't mean you stay quiet. That night, I didn't post anything. I didn't call anyone. I opened a journal I hadn't touched in years and started writing. Not for validation, not for witnesses. Just for me. Page 1. The night I slept in a Walmart parking lot, hiding my laptop under a jacket so it wouldn't get stolen. Page 2. The month I ate rice and eggs for dinner because payroll came before groceries. I wrote about nights I cried without tears, about signing contracts with hands that shook from fatigue, about learning code at 2 a.m. because I couldn't afford a web designer. And as I wrote, I realized something. I didn't want Callista's followers. I wanted my dignity. I didn't want exposure. I wanted accuracy. The next morning, I logged into my email and saw another headline, this time from a PR firm that managed events for women entrepreneurs. Callista Ridgway to headline this year's Women in Wellness Summit. Below that, a voice for the silent builders. I shut the laptop slowly, folded my arms across my chest, and stared at the wall. You want a voice? I whispered. I'll give you one. Ramona's email landed just after 7 a.m. I was pouring coffee, half awake, still in a sweatshirt from the night before. The subject line read, Urgent. Account activity prior to freeze. The first sentence said it all. Funds had been moved. Nearly 83% drained. Gone just hours before the court order reached the banks. I sat down without realizing I had. The mug thudded against the table. I opened the PDF summary. Wire transfers, all internal, routed between names I recognized. Marvin, Vera. Even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. They'd known. They hadn't just acted fast. They'd planned it. They saw this coming, I whispered. They planned every bit of it. Later that morning, as I tried to piece together what move to make next, my phone lit up with a name that twisted my stomach. Jill. She and I had been close since college. She knew everything, every version of me, from ramen nights to rooftop cries. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, she said softly, you've probably heard already. Heard what? There was a pause too long to be casual. I took a contract, PR work, for Callista's summit appearance. My mouth dried out. You're working for them? It's just business, Thea. I thought you'd understand that. You're stronger than anyone I know. You sold my story. You knew it was mine before she even claimed it. I'm sorry you see it that way. I see it exactly as it is. She didn't hang up, neither did I, but the silence between us was final. After the call, I opened my gallery and deleted every photo of us. Unfriended, archived, locked down. Then, I opened a new folder in my drive. Narrative control. Inside, I began dropping screenshots, contracts, emails, timestamps. I started building a timeline, not for revenge, but for reality. Mine. That night, Callista's email arrived. Let's put this to rest. We'll credit you as initial investor in the next press cycle. You deserve recognition. 15 minutes later, Vera chimed in. This is a chance to fix what's been broken, Althea. We're still family. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched, pulse steady. Fix wasn't the word. What they wanted was silence dressed in gratitude. I didn't respond, not yet. Instead, I opened a different tab. Ramona had taught me how to set permissions. I uploaded a file to encrypted cloud storage, labeled it truthvfinal.pdf, and shared access with her and no one else. In it were dates, voice memos, photos, screenshots, legal contracts, and a short note in my handwriting. If anything happens to me, make sure this sees light. I clicked save, then closed my laptop. You wanted to rewrite history, I said out loud. So will I. When I saw Miss Edna's name pop up on my phone, I didn't answer. She was my childhood piano teacher, the woman who once said my hands were built for concert halls. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Then came the voicemail, then another from Aunt Celeste, my godmother. Their messages were nearly identical. Althea, don't let this become ugly. Family is everything. Sweetheart, your mama's not perfect, but don't shame her. Don't destroy what she built. Not one asked what had been done to me. They'd all received their marching orders, Vera's preferred messengers, emotionally distant but socially credible. Their voices carried that heavy syrup of just trying to help, laced with condescension and polished guilt. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Silence, I'd learned, wasn't weakness. Sometimes it was positioning. The next day, the internet exploded. The clip dropped out of nowhere. No sender, no tags. Just a video titled, The Real Ridgeways, posted to a burner account on multiple platforms and reshared within hours across small business forums, local news forums, and entrepreneur groups. The voice was unmistakably Vera's, recorded during a meeting I wasn't invited to. Althea thinks she built something. She was just holding the purse. We let her feel important because it kept her useful. There was a pause. Then Marvin's voice. If she wanted credit, she should have started it herself. We're the ones with the name. The room in the video erupted with low laughter. I watched the clip alone in my apartment, eyes dry, fingers still. Then I played it again. And again. The third time, I muted it. Not because I couldn't stand the sound, but because I didn't need it anymore. I knew every word by heart. By the end of the day, Callista's social media was a battlefield. Why hasn't she addressed this? Wasn't the resort Althea's? Credit her. Or we're done supporting this brand. One of my old clients, a boutique hotel chain owner, called me out of the blue. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. We paused our deal with you a while back because we weren't sure who was behind what. That's on us. Offers back on the table, same terms. I thanked him, not with the fake smile I'd trained myself to use in boardrooms, but with the quiet kind that stays behind the eyes. Callista didn't post for 3 days. When she did, it was a filtered photo of her dog with no caption. Marvin released a statement through a generic family rep. This clip was selectively edited and taken out of context. But the damage was already done. The context was their faces, their laughter, their comfort in diminishing me. That evening, I met Ramona at our usual cafe. No laptops, just printed papers and black coffee. I'm done proving, I told her. Let's start documenting. She nodded and slid over a fresh folder. Then let's work clean. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. They buried me, but I grew sideways. I went to sleep early. No anxiety, no nausea, just rest. The next morning, I opened my email expecting logistics, receipts, maybe a podcast follow-up. Instead, the subject line read, Profile Request, Salt Lake Business Weekly. The body was short. We'd love to highlight your journey, not the drama, but the work. Your resilience deserves focus. At the bottom, proposed title, From Silent Investor to Resilient Founder. I stared at the screen. Then I closed the laptop. No more silence, I said aloud, and no more saving people who never saw me. The call came at 9:16 p.m., less than 12 hours before I was supposed to speak at the Women in Leadership Summit. I'd rehearsed my remarks. I'd edited my slides. I'd even gone out and bought a blazer that didn't scream corporate, but still whispered, Yes, I belong here. Hi, Ms. Shipman, the woman on the line began, voice clipped. We're going to need to reschedule your keynote. It's a delicate moment for the brand, and we're prioritizing consistency. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence grow uncomfortable. Consistency with what? I finally asked. She hesitated. Well, with the image we're projecting, you understand. I did. I understood far too well. After hanging up, I checked the event website. Callista's photo was now front and center, framed in gold with the words, Featured Voice, Resilience in Modern Business. My name was gone. The email confirmation I'd received weeks ago, the subject line now read, Revised. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even forward it to Ramona. Instead, I logged into my email and saw something worse, a message from Vera. The subject line read, Let it go. The body was short. You're tearing this family apart. This crusade is hurting everyone. Do you think about how this affects our name, your sister's business, your father's blood pressure? We never asked for gratitude, Althea, but this vendetta is cruel. That was it. Not a single sentence acknowledging the clip, or the bank accounts, or the property deed. Just shame, wrapped in velvet, scented with motherly concern. I closed the email and opened Callista's social media. She'd posted a photo from the summit, a wide shot of her standing beneath the event banner, arms outstretched like a motivational speaker mid-pose. Her caption, Grateful to speak about overcoming. Sometimes misunderstanding isn't personal, it's a stepping stone. Comments were limited, likes were visible. I didn't engage, but I took screenshots, all of them. Then I opened a blank document on my desktop and titled it, What They Erased. I started typing. I told the truth, not as a weapon, not as a plea, but as record. The nights I worked while they vacationed, the deals I negotiated while they hosted dinner parties, the hours I spent solving problems they never knew existed. When I finished, I didn't post it. I saved it. Then I attached it to an email addressed to myself. Subject line, If nothing changes by this date next year. Scheduled for March 14th, 12 months from now. That was my line. Not a threat, a boundary. I closed the laptop and stood at the window. Snow was falling again, light, dry, soft against the glass. My phone buzzed, a Portland area code. I answered. Hi, is this Althea Shipman? Yes. This is Naomi Foster from the Northwest Collective. We saw the recent news and video. We believe in ethical leadership. Would you consider relocating and possibly heading a new initiative here? I didn't speak for a moment. I looked out at the Salt Lake skyline, small, familiar, and suddenly too quiet. I'm open, I said finally. And for the first time in months, that word didn't feel like surrender. They wanted brunch. Vera called first, her voice syrupy with concern. Just a light meal, she said. It's been too long, and we all want to move forward. I almost didn't go, but something about her tone felt rehearsed, and rehearsals usually meant a performance. I needed to see it for myself. We met at a quiet cafe in Sugar House, one of those places that served expensive avocado toast and played acoustic covers of 80s hits. Vera arrived first, in her usual pressed blouse and pearls, Marvin close behind, acting as though nothing had burned between us. They smiled too easily, as if waiting for the cameras to roll. "We've been doing some thinking," Marvin said as we settled into the booth. "Callista's been expanding the spa's brand reach. There's real momentum, and, well, it only makes sense to include you in a meaningful way this time." I didn't respond. I let him keep talking. Vera leaned in. "We thought maybe you'd want to build something new with us. Together?" Then came the Zoom call. Callista's face flickered onto the tablet screen like a newscaster. She launched into a pitch like it was Shark Tank. "We've outlined a franchising model," she said, flipping through a deck of slides I wasn't given. "Althea, with your capital and name recognition, we could fast-track this coast to coast." Then Marvin slid a single page across the table. "A proposal. We bring the vision," he said. "You bring the capital." I looked down at the paper. Bullet points. Promises. Not a contract. An assumption. I let them finish. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope, thicker than it looked. I placed it on the table without a word and slid it toward Marvin. He hesitated. Vera's eyes darted between us. Callista's video feed froze just slightly. I said quietly, "This is my answer." Marvin opened the folder, saw the lawsuit header, and paled. Vera gasped. Callista blinked on screen and then abruptly disconnected. I didn't smile. I didn't explain. I just folded my hands in my lap and waited for them to speak. But no one did. I stood, tucked my chair in, and left my untouched coffee behind. On the walk back to my car, I passed a small bookstore. In the display window sat a stack of newly released memoirs. One caught my eye. When Silence Breaks, Stories of Invisible Builders. I stepped inside, ran my fingers along the spine, flipped to a random page. The passage was about a woman who funded her husband's company and disappeared from the history books. I bought it. Later that night, I got home, kicked off my shoes, and checked my inbox. There it was. Subject line: "Welcome to Portland. A flight confirmation. Departure next week. Destination: my second chance." A few minutes later, Ramona texted, "Let me know when you land. I've looped in local council." I replied with one sentence: "Let's build something that's mine." My new place sat above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon every morning. The windows fogged from the ovens downstairs, and sometimes when I cracked them open, I could hear the owners arguing in French, loud but oddly comforting. No one here knew my name. I could walk a block, grab coffee, wander past bookstores, and no one stopped me to ask what my sister had done or what I planned to do about it. It felt like oxygen. Real, cold, unfiltered air after months of being suffocated by false narratives and forced reunions. The first meeting with the Portland Business Collective was small. Just a circle of warm faces in a co-working loft with mismatched chairs. They didn't ask about headlines. They asked about values, about long-term strategy, about what kind of business culture I refused to recreate. For the first time in years, I wasn't defending myself. I was designing something from scratch, with my name on the blueprint. A few days later, I checked my inbox before bed and saw it. An email from Everett. He had never been verbose, but this time he made an effort. He wrote, "I didn't know what to believe. Callista's version made more sense to me. Until I saw your clip. You looked like someone who's been through hell and didn't scream about it. Then, the gut punch. She's still your sister. Maybe this all went too far? I stared at the screen. I could have typed 10 paragraphs, tearing down every word. Instead, I closed the browser and reached for a pen. I wrote him a letter by hand. You never chose me. You chose convenience. You liked me quiet, agreeable, a soft landing spot between your big ambitions. But the second I asked to be seen fully, you blinked and turned away. I don't hate you. I just finally understand what you were. I folded the paper neatly, lit a match, and watched the letter curl and collapse into black ash in my sink. I rinsed it down with cold water, then opened a window to let the smoke clear. The next week, I hosted my first workshop, Invisible Builders, the Real Founders. It wasn't glamorous. 30 chairs, half filled, a pot of coffee that went cold too fast. But every woman in that room listened like I mattered, like she mattered. Small business owners, midlife career switchers, women who were told they were too old, too tired, too late. Halfway through, someone asked, "When did you stop needing credit?" I paused, smiled, and said, "When I stopped expecting it from people who were never going to give it." Something cracked open in me then. Not pain, possibility. That night, I returned to my apartment, pulled off my shoes, and sat cross-legged on the floor. My phone buzzed. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi," a small voice said. "It's Leora." I sat straighter. "Hey, sweetheart." There was a pause. Then, "They're saying you abandoned us. That's not true, right?" My eyes burned, but I kept my voice even. "I didn't leave you, Leora. I left them. I stopped letting them erase me." She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, quietly, "Will I ever see you again?" I swallowed, then answered. "When you're ready to hear the whole story. Not just theirs. When you want the truth." She whispered, "Okay," and then hung up. The silence afterward didn't hurt. It felt like something new beginning. The rain had been steady all morning, soft against the kitchen window, like someone gently reminding me I was somewhere else now. I'd prepped notes for the podcast recording set later that afternoon, made tea, and sat with a quiet calm that hadn't visited me in years. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. Then something in my chest nudged me. I answered. "Hi, Aunt Thea. I wanted to hear your voice, Leora." Her voice had changed slightly. Less little girl, more in between. I closed my eyes. "I'm here," I said gently. "They say you broke us," she whispered. "But I remember when you taught me how to read receipts, when you told me that knowing what things cost helps you decide what they're worth." I didn't interrupt. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving," I said after a beat. "I left because I started loving myself." There was a pause long enough to feel like a question. "I'm glad you did," she whispered, so soft I wasn't sure I was meant to hear it. That alone was enough to carry me through the rest of the day. Later, at the podcast studio, nothing fancy, just a back room at a local station, I spoke into a microphone like I was talking to a single person in the back of a room. Not everyone, just the ones who felt erased. "Success," I said, "means nothing if you're still begging for permission to exist." I didn't mention names. I didn't throw punches. I spoke in truths. The host, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me, teared up at the end. "You didn't just build something," she said. "You built a door where there wasn't one." The episode aired 2 days later and traveled faster than I could have predicted. My inbox filled with letters from strangers, women who had funded their husbands' dreams, mothers who had left toxic churches, daughters who had walked away from their last names. Invisible builders, they called themselves. I was still answering them when the letter arrived. Handwritten, postmarked from Salt Lake. The envelope was thin. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Vera." I opened it carefully. "Althea, I won't ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't know how. But I needed to say something while I still could. We were wrong, not just in what we did, in what we never said. You deserved to be seen, and we refused you that. Mom, there were no conditions, no let's talk or come home. Just the weight of something she could no longer outrun. I placed the letter in a small box I kept at the back of my closet. It was labeled Unfinished Things. I didn't know if I'd ever reply. That evening, I stood by my window, watching the rain trail down the glass, like someone gently pulling threads through fabric. You can be free and still feel love, I murmured. You can be hurt and still not hate. I wasn't healed. I wasn't perfect. But I was whole in a way I hadn't been since before they decided who I was allowed to be. And for once, I didn't need anyone else to confirm it. Sometimes, life doesn't give us the closure we want. It hands us the truth we've been avoiding. And truth, no matter how sharp, is a gift. I spent years believing that if I gave enough, proved enough, stayed quiet enough, I'd finally earn a place at their table. But peace doesn't come from being accepted by the wrong people. It comes from accepting yourself, even when others won't. If you've ever been the one in the background, the quiet contributor, the invisible backbone, know this: your story matters. You don't need permission to take up space in your own life. You don't owe silence to those who mistook your loyalty for weakness. And you don't need to keep forgiving people who aren't sorry. The biggest change in my life wasn't walking away. It was finally choosing to walk toward myself. So let me ask you, have you ever been written out of your own story? And what would it look like if you wrote it back in? With your name on every page? If this video touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like it, that's okay too. Let me know why and what story you'd rather hear. I love connecting with you all, wherever you are. And hey, if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next story. We're just getting started.